All right, so first thing is I want to thank you guys for coming out to the morning session, and we have an overwhelming response, so again, thank you. And, just a bit of an overview. Why are we doing this session? We know that there are students who struggle getting through the task. We know that there are teachers who also struggle getting through the task. So I'm just looking to share some strategies with you to simplify some of your instructional planning. And hopefully at the end of today's session, you'll be able to take some stuff back to you or back to your school, might be helpful for you. The other thing is, we're going to talk about two components. One of the components is completion of the POS task list, and then the other component is how that ties into articulated qualifiers. So we're going to talk a little bit about like curriculum mapping and some things, and then we'll go into some data that I pulled that hopefully will help you. The first thing I want to do is just get a sense of who you are in the audience, how many administrators we have, how many teachers we have. If you could just raise your hand if you're an administrator in the room, that'll help gauge me a little bit. Okay. All right. And then teachers, the rest of you teachers or counselors. Okay, very good. Again, that just gives me a sense of who my audience is and helps me along with that. All right. So the next thing I kind of wanted to get an idea of is how much effort or emphasis do you put on students completing the program of study task list as a teacher? Several teachers will say, well, you know what, I focus on what are the local business and industry needs? What are my local representatives telling me students need to complete? So I understand that not every student is going to be able to complete the program of study task list, and that's okay. But what are we doing to make sure that we are exposing students to that full task list? So we're going to talk about that. All right. Question here is, why am I presenting this information? Well, Dell asked me to, and we want to keep PDE happy. So this summer I was, always want to keep PDE happy. But this summer I was at one of the conferences, and I had an opportunity to talk to Dell for 5 or 10 minutes, and upon bending his ear, I'm very passionate about curriculum. So he took the time to listen to me, and I said, these are our needs, and this is what I'm trying to do at my school. And he said, you need to share this information. So that's one of the reasons why we're here. Some of the other reasons is the Integrated Learning Conference. We really should be sharing strategies. So if you ever have an opportunity to get to present any information, come and present and share and give back to the rest of the group, okay? All right. The other thing I want to mention is what I'm going to share with you today are simply strategies. I'm waiting for our school to really fully implement this so that we can get the results, but this is just kind of the concept. All right. So again, we're going to talk about task completion and then articulated qualifier data. All right. So here are a couple of things that I want to mention as far as some of the basics. When we're looking at students completing the POS task list. I just have to step out for 1 second.
Okay. In the conversation, she had mentioned before that sometimes it's possible that all students may not complete the task grid. Obviously, that's the case if the student has an IEP, because the IEP would supersede what we would expect a student to have done in the task grid. So that's maybe one thing or one reason why they would not be able to complete the task grid. However, what she also said was very important. It's super important that all students are exposed to the task grid, and if there's not an IEP that would prohibit all those tasks being covered in a classroom for that student during that program of study, all students should be expected to complete the task grid. While she's out and before she comes back, there's one more thing I'd like to mention, and this is something that Dave and I have run into, in that sometimes students are put out on internships or externships or whatever you call them, your school, and all the skills or tasks are not checked off in the task grid. And sometimes the instructor says, well, that place of employment is covering all those skills and they should check them off. Student comes back to school, is going to graduate, tasks aren't checked off. Go back to the place of employment and say, why aren't these checked off? And their response is, that's not our responsibility. That's the school's responsibility. So the point being taken is this: if you're putting students out on co-op, internships, externships, or whatever you call them, you make sure you have an agreement with that institution or that organization to get them checked off. It would be our desire that hopefully before they go out, it would be nice to know that the majority of them would be done regardless before they go out.
Now, can I double that one?
Sure.
Hi, Dave Garnes, Pennsylvania Department of Ed. I do get telephone calls from the colleges who receive the Perkins allocations of students who are turning in incompleted program of study task lists and asking for the SOAR credits. And in one particular situation, a student was out in culinary arts and had a experience out in the world of work at a work site, but part of those competencies were not checked. And unfortunately, we could not award that credit to that student. The student had already graduated. The dialogue never took place between the co-op instructor and the institutional food worker instructor in order to ensure that those competencies are met in completing the list. Now, I have James Lebomsky is also here with me, this gentleman that's seated next to me over here. And James and I are also auditors for the certified nurse aid training programs across Pennsylvania, the nurse aid training programs. And if you're familiar with nurse aid training, before that student gets to the clinical training experience, those skills that are needed in the clinical training experience are to be demonstrated and assessed during the procedure lab section, the skills lab section of the training of that course. Well, really, there's a little difference between that and what we're talking about right here in completing the POS task list, competencies, and requiring the student to demonstrate those competencies before they get out into the workplace. If you take culinary, for example, you want to teach the safety before they get out into the workplace, not after they get out into the workplace. So with that being said, Dr. Hart, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Adrian just had surgery a couple weeks ago, and so she was not even supposed to be back to work yet. She's doing this because
I'm going to stay seated.
So I'm going to get her coffee, but she's going to do this from a seated position, okay?
So she's given my explanation. Thank you. I thought I was dropping on the floor there for a minute, but I'm good now. I'm seated and I'm good to go. So I apologize, but thank you for bearing with me. Anyways, back to the basics. We want to talk about some of the reasons why we want to focus on students completing the task list. But here are some basic things that we did at CIT. We did some staff professional development. During that staff professional development, we realized that not all the teachers knew how to quickly access the percentage of completion reports. So whatever student database system you use, we happen to use something called Classmate. Make sure as teachers or make sure administrators that your teachers know 100% where they can go to pull those reports at any time. It's really important as well that they're pulling the right reports, because if you as a teacher have value-added tasks. Maybe you have 20 or 30 added tasks to the POS state task list. You want to make sure that you're pulling the report that is giving the percentage of completion of just the POS tasks and not the ones with value-added tasks, because that'll give you skewed information. So, the first thing I'd say that we did was we started with some of the basics, which is professional development for the staff. Also, a lot of our teachers started using student portfolios. I'm sure many of you do that. Within those student portfolios, the students are keeping track. Again, these are just some basic minor things that we started off with. Doing quarterly student evaluations, sitting down with students, pulling the percentage of completion report, talking to them, laying it out. How are their grades? Talk to the students about their goals. Some other basic things is to look at some annual percentage of completion reports. As administrators, we should be pulling those annual percentage completion reports and looking at it by program. Are there trends within programs? Are we seeing low percentage of completion within a specific program? And if so, let's talk to those teachers. Teachers, at the end of the year, pull your percentage of completion for the whole class. Look for trends and and things of that nature. We need to do a better job at using data to kind of drive our instruction. Also developing percentage of completion incentives. You can do that school-wide. You can do that as an instructor within your classroom. Another basic thing is to look at aligning some of those NOCD tasks with the POS task list and crosswalking them. I think I heard somebody say in April, all of a sudden, you get through NOCD and then instructors are marking off a whole bunch of tasks that students completed. Well, we know from January until April, everything's NOCD, 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 NOCD. So if we look at aligning the task list with NOCD, as you're focusing on those NOCD things, you can also focus on the task list at the same time. Some additional things, I already talked about the value-added tasks. Be careful that you're not including those in the percentage of completion because it will skew it. SLOs. Have any of your schools started to look at teacher SLOs as part of percentage of completion? I see a couple heads nodding. Okay. This isn't something that we have started with. We started with the basics, which was components of NOCD. But that is an option that I'm looking to explore, is to look at the percentage of completion. Now, I would never, ever suggest or imply that you have a SLO that says, my students will complete 100% of the program. You need to be realistic. So come up with a realistic percentage of the students within your class will complete whatever percentage you want. So again, be realistic with those SLOs, but the SLOs are certainly an option to consider for administration if you're looking to focus on this at your school. And then task charts. We have some teachers who display some task charts in the classroom, and these students become very competitive. And if you look at the picture here, this is so hard. I want to stand up so bad. I'm sorry, guys. I know I can't right now. If you look at the picture here, this is a teacher from Computer Systems Networking, and what they did was they developed level 1, level 2, and here's level 3. And these, we call them success boards. And Mr. Thomas, who created this, he said the students are very competitive with this, and they put a star up next to the duty or the chapter or the unit, and every teacher has it done a little bit differently. We've been focusing a lot on trying to, instead of individual lessons, make them unit plans. Some teachers do like to teach by chapter, but then they need to crosswalk the tasks to the chapter. Whatever it may be, I'm not one who dictates how it needs to be. As long as you're getting through that task list, that's fine. But a chart like this is really a good motivator. The students can see it very visually, and when they get through a unit, they love being able to go up and put that star on that board. And as elementary-ish as it sounds, students like rewards. Okay. And then, you can do certain things in your classroom. You can set up initiatives, or incentives, I should say. So you might want to say, all right, class, what would be a good incentive for you if we got through 20% of the curriculum from now until, whatever point in the school year. So there are incentives that you could set up on your own as well. All right. We do have another teacher in, I think it's automotive technology, where he uses an Excel spreadsheet, and it's just as simple as putting the students' names on the left-hand side and just simply, checking off with a box or an X or whatever. So it doesn't have to be as visual as this is. It can be as simple as just using an Excel spreadsheet. Okay? All right, so what I just explained to you were just a couple small things that can be done. Like I said, working with the staff on professional development, making sure that your staff know and understand how to get certain percentage of completion reports. Now I'm going to go into what we focused on for the past 2 years, and that's something called curriculum mapping. Thank you. Oh, she's getting me sugar. I did the worst thing you could do and not eat breakfast this morning, so that, that kind of didn't help me, so I apologize. But thank you, Sandy. And breakfast, too?
Her mother.
Thank you, I appreciate it. All right, let me take a drink here. Okay, when I started as the supervisor of Career and Tech Ed, in the very first year I had to go into CATS, and I had to ask the teachers to provide me with a scope and sequence. One of the very first things I noticed is a trend that the tasks were just given to me in sequential order and broken down by a third, and it was we have 425 hours each year. And I said, wait a minute, so if you think about it, orientation and safety, year 1, you only teach orientation and safety for that first year? Well, no, I teach it second and third year. Okay, well, I don't see it on the scope and sequence for year 2, and I don't see it on the scope and sequence for year 3. So, not every teacher, but I found that a lot of staff members were just simply putting down the same sequence that the state developed and then just breaking down the hours by third. And I said, okay, well, this meets the requirements of what PDE says we have to put in to get our programs approved, but this is not at all realistic, and it's not at all how you're teaching. So we need to do a better job. So what we did was we started focusing on scope and sequence. I'm going to come back here and show you an example quick. This is computer systems networking, and the first thing we did, I said, break it out and make it realistic. So you can see here, he has duty 300 in year 1, duty 300 in year 2, duty 400 in year 1, 400 in year 2. So we started with the big picture and we made it more realistic. From there, I said, now, there's 9 marking periods in a week. Yeah, there's 9 weeks in a marking period. Let me go back and say that the right way. So now let's break it down by marking period. So if you're saying that level 1 students are going to complete whatever the duties are, now take that and break it down. So let me get to the right document here. Here we go. So what they did was they broke it down into year 1, marking period 1, 2, 3, and 4. And from there, the next process is going to be breaking it down. Let me come down here. Sorry. Now that we have this developed, the next process is going to be breaking it down by the week or identifying a time with it. And I recently attended the new director's PIL, and this was one of the things that we talked about, and Mary's in the audience today, is then we have to put hours attached to this and then start developing unit plans. But basically with our curriculum mapping, the example I want to share here is that for marking period 1, well, let's just make marking period 3 because that's a little bit easier. There's only 4 tasks there. Well, if there's 9 weeks in a marking period, that tells me that these tasks are pretty in-depth tasks and that they do require several weeks for each task. So the next step is going to be breaking that down and developing either unit plans or something that will realistically keep the teacher on track. Now, the idea behind this is that if you appropriately map out your curriculum and start with the big picture, the program of study task list that we submit in CATS, and then break it down by year, 3 years, and then break it down by marking period. After you break it down by marking period, now let's break it down by weeks or by units. This should help teachers instructionally keep on track so that you can look and say, okay, by January, I should be through X amount of the curriculum. If you're not, then you need to step it up a little bit. If you are, then you have some time that you can maybe pick up some extra projects or do some, some different things for community service projects. So this is essentially what we've been working on and where we're at so far. In between all of this, then there were some changes. I became the director. We got a supervisor, career and tech ed, who had principal experience but not career and tech ed experience. So all those changes took place in January. So we haven't actually move forward. This is kind of the last stage. This is where we're at right now. So my goal, and also, like I said, I've been attending the new director's PIL, which is helpful. My goal now is to move forward with identifying the next step, which will be breaking it down into those 9 weeks. All right. Has anybody done, or are there any other schools that are kind of at this point so far? Your school is, and have you been successful? It's getting better. It is a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. This is not something that happens overnight, but I think the more we work through the process, the more teachers will realize this ultimately helps me with planning, and it helps me to stay focused. Go ahead.
Just wanted to say one thing, working with this is it's great as a teacher, you can print it off, and then we can highlight it as I go through the task.
Yep.
And then when I'm going into the grade book, I can look at all my students and I can see, well, we covered this task, but I don't have a grade for this student. Why is that, or something like that. So
Okay.
for organizational wise.
That's a good point. Chad is one of our welding teachers, and he's relatively new coming to us. And, so that's a really good point, especially as a new teacher. That's a great observation. The other thing I will show you, just real quick, I just want to give you an example here, is this particular teacher for computer systems networking. Let me just go into one of his. So as we started working on unit plans, here's a unit for task 305, 405, and 406. he provides due dates. So it's due in 15 school days. So basically 2 weeks and a day's worth of instruction. So on that curriculum map, he would group these together and identify that this is going to take 2 weeks. And this is how he does. He's a very competency-based instruction, in his classroom, computer systems networking. It's a little bit more academic-based, so it works a little better in his class. But as you scroll down here, you can see he has stop points and checkpoints. He requires a signature. When the students get to a certain point, I guess I could use the mouse. When the students get to a certain point, they can they take it to him, the activity was completed or the activity was not completed, and the instructor or the paraeducator has to sign off on this. But again, this is just an example. When we talk about curriculum mapping, this particular instructor, task 305, 405, and 406 are grouped together, and then he can go back and he can reference his scope and sequence chart and and make sure that he's on task and on track with what the goal is. And again, 9 weeks in the marking period, and those marking periods fly, and there's only 4 of them in a year, and before you know it, they're being pulled for keystones. Now, we're half day, we're not full comprehensive, but they're being pulled for keystones and everything else. It's very challenging to get through the task list. And, I sit in a lot of meetings, and they say, well, the expectation is that you're supposed to get through them, and it is certainly a challenge. And we're above the required hours, and, we still struggle to get everybody through the task list. Mary?
Just a question about that. When you did your professional development,
Yep.
The biggest thing that I hear from teachers is the difference between delivering the POS and student completion at some level, a proficiency level assumed. So how did you, I'm just curious how your school defined when is the student, it's obviously not when it's exposed, because you're talking about, I taught that, so why aren't the kids getting that checked off? How did your teachers resolve that, defining when they check off the box?
So when I say percentage of completion, that is that the teacher exposed the students to the task and they have provided them with a grade. That does not mean that that grade is at a mastery level yet. That's the data portion that we're going to get into in just a moment, which relates to the articulation component of it. So, and again, you have to think about what's most important. Is it getting through the task list? Is it quantity or is it quality? And that's a tough balance. So as a teacher, you have to make that determination, and it may vary from year to year. And you know this because your population of students may alter. Are you going to be working on quantity this year or quality this year? Does that answer your question? No? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Then when you look at your reports of percentage of completion,
Yes.
what actually are they looking at? Is that percentage of the kids that have a grade for that percentage of tasks or whatever?
So with the student's name, it will provide the number of tasks graded out of the number of possible tasks. Then the next column provides the percentage of completion, 58% complete. And then there's other reports. So when I say professional development, there are other reports available for them to go in and print a matrix to see which tasks are less than the mastery threshold. So again, when I talk about providing professional development, making sure as a teacher that you know what reports are available to you. As administrators, we can't just assume that you have to keep track of your students' tasks. We have to provide you with the resources to help you do that. So whatever the student database system is that you use, if you're not familiar with, making sure that it's not just that the task was completed, but that it was completed with that mastery threshold that's required. Yes?
Is that remediation built in for like the kids we're talking about now, kids being exposed to tasks and a teacher teaching the task, but the
Yep.
kids actually mastering the task with remediation, or some type of plan built into the scope and sequence formal?
That's a really good question. Formal remediation for our school at least is not built in. However, I was in a session yesterday, the session that was, I'll have to think of the name, but what they did was they looked at a skill. For example, there was a cosmetology teacher, and they said they teach sanitation in the beginning of the year. However, that might be covered an additional 8 or 10 times throughout the course of the year. So I thought that was a really interesting concept. And the same thing with hand tools in the construction program. Okay, so they're going to use hand tools, but yet they're going to be using that throughout the course of the next 3 years. So we haven't specifically identified a school-wide type of of system for that. You know, I rely on our instructors to reassess the students at certain checkpoints or certain benchmarks throughout that time. And that's also why it's important to look at not just the percentage of completion, but as Mary was pointing out, to look at what is their mastery level. Did they master those tasks? Because it might show up on the completion report, they have 100% completed, but that doesn't mean it's with mastery. So it's important to look at both of those components. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so that if you weren't able to get into that session yesterday, I'm pretty sure a lot of the materials will be available online, or you could pick them up out front. So good questions. All right. Is anyone else doing anything with curriculum mapping that we could share? Because again, this session is really about sharing and what are other schools doing as well. So, all right, good. And, sorry, let me get back to where I was now. All right, so we talked a little bit about curriculum mapping. Boy, I'm really batting 1,000 here today, huh? And get through this, some of the basics. Okay. All right. So what can curriculum mapping be used for? We just talked a lot about what we did with breaking it down from the big picture, narrowing it down, going by marking periods, looking at units and stuff. So this is one of them, developing units. Identifying a 3-year plan, obviously for program of completion. That's why we're talking about this, keeping students on track. But did you ever think about how you feel as an instructor when you're mid-year through and you get new students who start in that second marking period, in that third marking period? So this curriculum mapping could be used for that as well. When they come in, you know, okay, do you go all the way back to the beginning and teach them and now they miss what you're currently instructing? Or do you try to let them sit in on what you're currently instructing and then give them what they missed and hope that they, you know, what do you do? There's really no right answer. I think a lot of it has to do with the student's ability and what's their current level and, you know, things like that. But you can kind of utilize what they've missed by looking at your scope and sequence. The other thing is, when you have, whether you attend the IEP meetings or you have somebody within your district who attends the IEP meetings, they can take these scope and sequences to the IEP meeting. And if they're looking to add a student or have a student start late in the year, they can show them, this is what they've already missed. So you are going to have to work extra hard to make up this particular part of the curriculum. So again, I think that the curriculum mapping can be utilized in multiple ways. It's not just to keep teachers on track. It's not just to you know, make sure that we're completing 100% of the program, but I think it can also help with trying to identify students who start in our programs late and making sure that they understand what they have to catch up on, or things like that. All right. So takeaways so far, you want to make sure that pretty much all of the sessions here at the Integrated Learning Conference, if there's anything you can take back, I think it's wonderful, even if it's just one component of the presentation. So think to yourself, what does your school currently do? Where are you at with your curriculum? You know, what are some ideas that you might have learned so far? Now, we didn't get into the data part with the articulated qualifiers, but what are some things that you may have learned that we talked about? And how can some of these new ideas be shared, implemented, evaluated? I know one of the hardest things when you go to a conference like this is 3 days of just a wealth of information that is just packed in your brain. You're gone for 3 days, so when you get back, you're already catching up on emails, finding out how your students behaved when you were gone, what you need to catch up on for next week's lesson plan. So you have all these things going on in your head. You know, so the best thing to do is just take the time to reflect and think to yourself, if there was anything I learned about curriculum mapping or some of the things that our school did that I shared with you today, how can you take that back to your school? Who do you take it back to? You know, you might want to develop some type of plan where you talk to an administrator and say, hey, you know, maybe we can start looking at doing some type of curriculum mapping, and then identify what the activity or plan would be for that. All right. So before we go into kind of looking at what we've done with the articulated qualifiers, are there any questions so far, or anything that you guys want to share that your schools have done? Because again, this is for me as well. I mean, we're all kind of working through this together, and why reinvent the wheel if we could share some ideas? Yes.
I just want to know, how long did it take for you to implement this to get to from the start to where you are now?
So About 3 years. And the reason I say that is because year one, when I came in as the supervisor, is when I realized most of the scope and sequences were not authentic. They were just being done out of obligation. So then I had to take some time to meet with the teachers and say, is this really what you're doing? And then did some professional development. And then from there, said, give me a new scope and sequence for just the duties and the hours. Okay, then we did some professional development, and I have a couple of my teachers here where we broke it down. And I said, okay, if you're teaching safety and orientation, do you teach that every year? Yep. Okay, when do you teach that? First marking period, second, third, or fourth? Mostly it's first marking period. Okay, so if the first year you might do 30 hours, second year do you do 20 hours, the third year do you 10 hours? You know, you have to stop and think, how do we break that down? So we're taking the big picture and we're narrowing it down, all right? If I were to have continued in my position as the supervisor career and tech ed, which is, you know, doing most of the curriculum and instruction, my next step at that point would have been where we're breaking it down by the weeks and within the marking period, and then grouping it together to create unit plans. And then from there, my idea is kind of develop an annual chart that the teachers can check off to keep themselves on task, so that you know, me as a teacher, I need to know, am I on track? You know, do I need to speed it up a little bit? Do I have some time to throw in some extra projects, things like that? But again, as I said, there was a bit of a transition with the administration, so we're not quite there yet.
Maybe 4 years.
I would say 4 years from beginning to end to be safe. Yep. Thanks. Good question. Was there another comment? Oh, that was. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
So you said go back and reflect and then see what you can improve upon. So if your program has just been reapproved, I don't know if you know the answer to this, and then going through this, you realize, oh my goodness, something else would align better. Maybe after hearing all this, we can do something better. Can you then go in and update your scope and sequence, or are you locked in?
So two parts, and you know, Day, you could probably help me with this. But once you put the scope and sequence in CATS, and CATS has closed for the year, I do not believe you can go in and make the changes.
Is this a tax question?
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess yes, it is a CATS question.
Essentially.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay. Yeah. CATS, for those of you that aren't familiar with CATS, is our program approval system for career and technical education at PDE. In the CATS system, under the scope and sequence tab, there is a section that you record the number of hours of the program and then the units that you're going to be instructing. There is limitations in that data system because they only allow for 8 boxes per year in that 2, 3, or 4 year delivery system, depending on what your number of hours are. Consequently, when you look at what's in CATS versus what you're actually doing on the POS task list, there is going to be somewhat of a misalignment because of the number of boxes that we allow in the data system. Okay. So the question, I think, let's restate the question now that I've given you that little background.
Okay,
So
so let's say you're doing what Adrienne suggested. Now you're just going to go back and you're going to look at the year and you work on breaking it down, and then you realize, oh my goodness, as you're going through the task list, oh, this course would have actually been better suited to meet the task
Okay.
list than this. Can you
Right.
go back?
Sure.
and-
Yes. So can you make edits? CATS is open and closes only for a brief period of time in December and January when the whole file is closed at PDE. So on an existing program, you can go in at any time and make those edits in the scope and sequence tab. All right. Now, you got to be careful when you make those edits because PDE reviews the programs once every 5 years. Some of you may be aware that your CTC programs were under reapproval last year. If you're in a comprehensive high school, those programs went under reapproval this year. Okay. So I'm one of the reapprovers. So I look at CATS and I say, oh, gee, this program only has 678 hours. Well, you need 720 in order to get the funding. You can run a 678 hour. You won't get the state funding for it. Okay? Wouldn't qualify. So then I call up the school and say, hey, did you make edits recently in CATS? Yes, we did. Well, we had to switch some units around. And here what they did when they switched the units around, the unit hours that they put in, now has it falling under 720. They're at 678. So you got to be careful when you make your edits. But there is a window of time you can go into that. Now, new programs, for new program approval for 2018-19, that's already closed. That closed in May of 2017. Okay, so there's really 2 dates in CATS you got to be aware of when the whole system closes.
December and January.
Right, and then when new program submission closes. Does that make sense, Del, what I just said there? Okay, we all right?
Perfect, just because in going through this, I've just realized a better alignment in everything you've said. It just kind of clicked on me, maybe this would, good.
And it's constantly reflecting. The teachers are constantly reflecting. I also wanted to note, or to point out here, for this particular instructor, he identifies tasks on his scope and sequence that are not POS tasks. And if you look, he actually highlights it here in yellow. And again, that's helpful for tracking because we want to add those value-added tasks that local business and industry members are saying are important, but where do they fit in? Do they fit in within a specific unit? And then make sure that we're, because that's not part of the articulated component. All right. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Just to piggyback on what Adrian was saying, I've even taken this and aligned my task list itself as progression as first year, second year, third year. Because then the students and I can look at the grades and actually see right where they are and where they're progressing. So my task list is kind of lined up with that scope and sequence as I go through. So it's a way that the students can see it and I can see it.
And Mr. Iazzello is one of our masonry instructors at CIT, so thank you. All right, I'm going to move into the articulated component of it. And obviously, most of you, hopefully you all know, that in order to be an articulated qualifier, you have the overall GPA that they have to meet, competent or mastery level on 100% of the POS tasks, not value added, and then passing the end of program assessment, whether it's NOCTI or whether it's NIMS. So everything we talked about in the first session kind of ties into that completion part, but not just completing the tasks, but completing them with mastery. So when I again, started as the supervisor of career and tech ed, one of the things I'd like to do over the summer was dive into some data, just for my own purposes, and to get an idea of what are some of the skill gaps, what are some of our weak areas, analyzing programs, analyzing student results, and that's how I came up with the next piece that I wanted to share with you. And basically what I did, if I can get back here, sorry, is, let's just do this. We'll start with this one. I provided you guys should have a handout there. The very first page of the handout for the 15-16 school year was simply myself over the summer looking at data. I had not had any conversation with teachers about this. Again, I came in and didn't want to make too many changes my first year as an administrator. But the very first page, 15-16 articulated qualifiers, I took the students' names out. You can see the programs there, and there's an X on the columns for yes, that they mastered the 85% NOCTI or NIMS, and that they completed 100% of the program to the mastery level. So we had 22 qualifiers that year. When you flip over to the next page, you will see the top 5 students. Well, the top of it, these are the students who met 2 out of the 3 requirements. You may consider these like those bubble students. So they didn't meet all 3 of the requirements, but they met 2 out of the 3 requirements. So when you look at this at the top, the first 5 students, I sorted them to show that they were ones that did not meet the 85% GPA. And I almost fell off my chair when I saw how close they were. So what do you think I was thinking, or what do you think that meant for me as an administrator when I saw those first 5 results? Some of these teachers may not know where to go in the student database system to look at the overall GPA, to look at their overall students' GPA. So again, we use Classmeet. Classmeet, the live view is that current year. So if a student is a senior, it's coming up with a live view that they might have a 90% overall GPA. But for articulation, it's the whole time. So when the student goes to graduate and our classmate student database system prints out who the qualifiers are, it takes their GPA from 10th grade, GPA from 11th grade, GPA from 12th grade, combines them all together. So there is no way that any of these teachers would have allowed this had they known. So again, what did that tell me? I need to make sure that the staff know how to utilize the student database system to make sure that things like this don't slip through the cracks.
Is your classmate like what we would be using at Easton Power School? Is it just the overall
Yes.
grades, et cetera, et cetera?
Correct. But I believe, does Power School have a snapshot of all the years that they're there, basically, right? Classmate is, and I don't want to get into...
We do, but as academic teachers, we're not allowed to get in and look at the students'
Oh.
programs of study for privacy reasons. So it's very challenging because then we can't get in
I would think, yeah.
and look at like their 9th and 10th grade,
Okay.
or we can only look at the current year as the teachers. We
Okay.
can't go back.
So it's limited. And with Classmate, again, it gives us that live view of the current year. But to go back and look at archives, it's just a little cumbersome. So it really told me that I needed to focus with the teachers on how to look at the overall GPA. So if they're in year 2, what's their overall GPA and where do they need to be at? This could have impacted a lot of qualifiers over the years by not realizing how close they were to meeting that GPA threshold.
Now,
Yes.
Adrian,
Oh.
quick comment. The overall GPA is different than, we require a 2.5
Yes.
in the technical core,
Ye-
portion
Yes.
of their GPA.
Yes.
The technical core. And that's what you're looking at.
That's what our data pulls, yes. Not the academics or not anything in additional. These are just the, yeah, sorry. So that was the first thing. Then you look over here and you see there were 3 students who didn't pass the NOCTI, but they got the GPA and they completed the program. It happens. But now, when I looked over here on the right-hand side, these were students who did not complete the task list. And the numbers here represent the number of tasks that they still had to complete at mastery. So this is not just students who completed tasks, this is tasks mastered. So I want to make that clear. So when you look here, like protective services had a student who was 3 tasks away. So here's a protective service student who got the GPA, they passed the NOCTI, and they missed it by 3 tasks. So, of course, you know, again, going through this, I realized there were a number of students. Now, down here, when you have students like 128 or 139, you know, they're just so far off, they're not even going to come close to it. But those that are close, I think it would have been important if teachers were monitoring this a little better. And it wasn't, you know, I don't think it was negligence on their part. I think administrators need to make sure that staff have the resources and they know where to find the resources. So it's our job as administrators to make sure that you know that. All right. Then what I did, that was the year that we did some professional development and really focused on where to find this information in our classmate system. Now the second year, which you should have there, 2016-17. Oh, I'm sorry.
We have 2 copies of 16, 17.
Sorry about that. You don't have 15, 16? Okay. Del, maybe that was our problem when our copies.
The question is,
Go ahead.
is there anyone in this room that looks at data to this detail? Because this, when I saw this in action, this just blew my mind. I mean, I don't know of another director that knows how many tasks people completed or not, down to do that 3 tasks. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I don't know how long it took you to do this, Adrian, but I mean, it's not a hard chart to develop, I don't think.
No, and it really just led from my curiosity, and I just kind of dug a little farther and dug a little farther. And you know me, Mike, I'm very much a data person. And, you know, when the results sort of surfaced, it hit me in the face, and I went, oh my God, look at all the students who could have been qualifiers. What happened here? I did not put any blame. I have a couple teachers here. They surprised me this morning and sat in on my session. Did I ever put any blame on you guys?
This is the first one here.
No.
Yes. Yeah, the professional development, and that's the thing that you have to realize is when you have something that you want to implement with the teachers, you have to start small and embed a little bit. So as Mr. Eisel is saying, is we started with professional development on how to utilize our classmate system, where to pull the percentage of completion reports. Now we're focusing on scope and sequence, how we're going to break that down, and now we're going to tie all this together, and then my goal was in the next year, then we loop back and voila, our problems should be solved, and we should start to see improved results, right? So I just real quick want to share a difference with the second year that we focused on. Same concept, the first page was the qualifiers. When you flip to the second page, if you notice, there's a little bit of a difference there from the first year that I did this to the second year. And basically, under program completed, if they did not complete the program to mastery, the tasks completed are listed there. So for example, for auto collision, 94 tasks out of 113 tasks were completed for the first student who was anonymous. Well, that's 83%. But 83% of the program completed doesn't mean much to me because building construction technology has 99 tasks and culinary arts has several tasks and auto tech has several tasks. So, you know, it's not really fair for me to just look at the percentage that's completed. So what I really wanted to do is get a bigger picture and see how many tasks were completed out of the number of tasks that were expected. So again, breaking that down a little bit farther gave me a better idea. Then I color coded any of the students who are in green were students who were 90% or greater. So they were so close, so close. And then you can see the different, or no, I'm sorry, red. I think red was 90%. All right. One thing to point out is that cosmetology is not a program of study, so they don't have the articulated credits. However, they're included on the report here.
Adrian,
Yes?
do you no longer have your administrative assistant program?
The administrative assistant program was approved, but we never had enough enrollment to run the program. So unfortunately, that's not there. All right. You know, each year we should be reviewing our programs, analyzing the programs, the effectiveness of programs. And I say programs because it's not so much that we should be analyzing the teachers and the effectiveness of the teachers, but overall the program itself. So this is a piece of evidence that you could use and then start looking for trends. You know, if I have, I'm just going to pick out CAD here, for example, is in the green, and there's several students in green. I need to sit down with that teacher and have a conversation and make sure, do they know how to access the student information system in Classmate? You know, what are they doing? So again, the scope and sequence. How can the scope and sequence help you so that students don't get so close and miss it by just 9 tasks, you know? So hopefully all of this will tie together. And although I come to you presenting today, I don't have results to give you as far as improvements. What I really wanted to share with you today is where I started, where we've been going, my hopes of what will happen, and to find out, you know, what are you guys doing in your schools to try to help with this whole process?
I'd like to ask the teachers, when you saw these charts, what was your reaction? I mean, right now, in your classroom, what are you doing different? Because once you see the data, it's not an interesting tool. I mean, I don't want to put anybody under the gun, but I know the masonry teacher here is the best one in the state, so I got to ask them.
I'll tell you what it did. It got me to be a little more organized, where you have the big picture sometimes in your quarters, sometimes in the middle. It got me a little bit more driven down during the weeks. That now I can judge from year to year of where my game has to be picked up. So at first it was, what else do we have to do? And then I got the purpose, and then I got a little more organized in where I'm at, and that's how the task list got revised to work the scope and sequence. But to be honest with you, I just wrote down here that I have to get that scope and sequence instead of filling it out and then put it in my file. I think that has to be up near my desk somewhere. You know, somewhere where it's in my face where I can look at that and say, okay, I'm all right now.
Yeah. And one of the things I started doing a few years ago with the teachers is I have a mid-year meeting with them. It's not evaluative or whatever. And during that mid-year meeting, my goal, and again, you heard that we've had some turnover of administration, but my goal is to sit with the teachers just as we asked you to do with the students, where you sit with the students and say, where are you at with your percentage of completion? My goal is to have Mr. Kaler sit with you guys and say, where are you at with your scope and sequence? You know, you're how many weeks into the year? So it's kind of the same thing, keeping things on track.
I mean, it's a balance. I mean, you just can't, there's kids that are just gonna struggle. You want the basics down. I mean, that's just, I think our job is to feel that. You know, some of them just get the basics and it might take them twice as long.
Yep.
Or this may not be driving them as much. But if you can keep the herd going, then I think we win.
Yeah.
You know.
And this is not for every student, but instructionally, this helps to keep you on task. This helps you to identify what you still need to, complete and instruct throughout the year. The other thing I will just mention real quick is some additional data that I'm looking to analyze is what is the student's level and the date of enrollment? When you look at that last report I showed you, which was 16-17, I started thinking, well, maybe I should know, when did this student enroll? Maybe just because they were a senior and graduated, I don't know, are they a level 1 student? Are they a level 2 student? Are they a level 3 student? So that to me is important. Do they have an IEP or 504 considerations? I mean, not that we want to label or stigmatize that, but we say, oh, there's 40% population of students in our school that have an IEP, and this is why we can't get through this. So I'd like to break that down and analyze that a little bit. How many of these students who are either 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 have an IEP? Maybe it'll show some really great results that we can say, the IEP doesn't impact the success of the students, and it shouldn't. All right. And then the other thing I didn't think about is co-op students. We send our co-op students out, maybe the end of their junior year or senior year. What are we doing to make sure that those co-op students are still completing the task list? Great, they're passing the NOCTI, and great, they're satisfying the GPA. But what if they only had 10 tasks that were still left, and we didn't push or encourage that to become completed? So I would like to take a look and kind of disseminate it a little bit farther and break it down, and I think that will be helpful for me to look at some trends as well. Okay. I see lots of wheels turning. All right. Any other questions at this point? Mr. Schliffer. Oh, I feel, am I making you nervous? I'm sorry. Thank you for bearing with me. So I appreciate it.